Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Meredith E. Phillips. I'm a writer, reader, and bunny mama. Today I'm going to be continuing my series inspired by film. This series takes a look at different aspects of film and filmmaking to see how that might inspire our writing. In the last two installments, which I'll link to below and right here in the cards in case you missed them, they were on cinematography and acting. In today's video, we're going to be looking at production design. Oh, wait. Isn't that one of those weird categories that we don't really know what it means? So when the Oscars are on, it's the perfect time to go to the bathroom or get a drink or something? Well, maybe, but it is something you should care about. It's part of what makes the movie complete and really sinks you as the viewer into the story and the characters. So what exactly is production design? Production design is the scenery or sets in TV or film that are created and arranged with the aim to support the overall artistic goal of the production. Wait, what? Basically, it means it's the sets and the location scenery and all that kind of stuff. The production designer and their team create the sets and the props to go in the sets. They're going to be working very closely with the director to make sure that the sets are contributing to the overall look and feel of the film. They're also going to be working closely with teams like the cinematography team, the costume designers, even people like the makeup artists, to make sure that the vision is cohesive. Let's say, for example, the director wants a film with a very minimalistic look to it. Clean lines, not a lot of props in the set, neutral colors, things like that. If the production design follows that vision, but then say the costume designer creates a really frilly and gaudy dress for the main character to wear, those two things are not going to look like they belong in the same film. Now, if you're wanting that character to stand out for that kind of gaudy, over-the-top reasoning, that's a different story. But if you're wanting everything to look like it belongs together and has the same feel to it, then all these different teams of people are going to need to work together to create that vision. Unless you really love film and delving into the filmmaking aspect, production design is probably not what you're paying attention to when you watch movies. And good production design should be invisible. It should fit so seamlessly with the rest of the film, with the rest of the story and the characters, that you just don't even notice it. Usually when you do notice production design, it's because the sets look really fake or cheap. We are going to take a look at a couple stellar production designs on different films and pick out the pieces of those sets that make it super believable within the context of the story. Now, keep in mind when you're writing, you can't necessarily put in every single detail of your setting. If you do that, you're going to be going on for pages and pages about what somebody's kitchen looks like, and the reader is either going to start skimming through it or they're going to get bored and put the book down altogether, which you definitely do not want to happen. But sprinkling in a few of these really specific details can really set the scene and make the scene come alive for the reader. So in looking at these examples from film, I hope that those will give you some ideas about how to incorporate some really interesting detail into your writing when you're trying to set the scene. So let's take a look at some different production design that stands out in the best possible way. We're going to start by going back 100 years exactly to the very creepy and very unsettling German film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which was released in 1920. This is probably the most well-known example of German expressionism in film, and it's also considered to be one of the very first full-length horror films. It tells the story of a mysterious man, Dr. Caligari, who arrives at a fair one day with a hypnotized man in a case. Dr. Caligari claims that this man can predict the future in his hypnotized state, but in reality, Dr. Caligari uses the man to commit murders for him. If you are a horror writer or you just love horror films, you need to see this movie. It's only about an hour and 15 minutes long, which is fairly typical for this time period, and it is so old that it's actually available to view in full on YouTube for free. So I'll link down below to that video if you're interested in checking it out. It's also, of course, available to rent or buy on other platforms. But for now, let's check out a couple of stills from this movie. This first one is an interior shot showing Dr. Caligari and his hypnotized man in a case that ends up looking very much like a coffin. The set here is minimal in terms of props, but of course your eye is immediately drawn to the crazy angles and shadows on the walls. The shadows are actually painted onto the walls here, which not only gives them a harsh look, but adds to the dreamlike quality of the set. The ceiling bows up in an unlikely arch, and even the window is not the typical rectangle you would expect. All of these intersecting angles and strange shadows definitely give the scene a horror-like vibe. This next still from the film is almost not recognizable until you look closely. This is the hypnotized man carrying his next victim, the main heroine in the film, across the rooftops of the city. The angles make no sense and they rise jagged and awkward from the ground. Even the rods here that would maybe hold like a chimney cap or something are exaggerated and angled so that the eye is drawn to the figures in the center. Next, let's jump ahead a couple decades to 1940 with Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. This is a mystery suspense film that follows the story of a young woman who becomes a new wife to a man who has tragically lost his first wife in a terrible accident. But the memory and influence of that first wife, Rebecca, doesn't seem to ever go away. The film is mostly set in this palatial mansion that Rebecca, the first wife, and Maxim, the husband, lived in previously. Everything about this place is completely over the top in its extravagance. The set design here is incredible in the way that it continually reinforces how grand and romantic a woman Rebecca was, while Maxim's new wife is much more reserved and really a little bit mousy in a lot of ways. So let's take a look at some stills from this film and pick apart what exactly we can find within the sets. Here you can see the set for Rebecca's bedroom. The ceilings are incredibly tall with dramatic curtains and elaborate sconces. Even the wallpaper has images on it, not just a simple pattern. The vanity is set on top of a lush carpet and all of the makeup and hair accessories are arranged perfectly atop it. You can see the molding over the door frame is also bigger and grander than normal, with a sophisticated swoop to the arch, creating more upward movement in the scene. Fresh flowers sit on the table to the left, and what appears to be a silver cup next to them. There are even a pair of shoes or maybe slippers on the ottoman in front of the overstuffed chair at the center. When two of the characters, the new wife and Rebecca's intensely loyal housekeeper, enter the room, they are almost always looking up at the grandeur of this room, very similar to how Rebecca always seems to be looming over the household even in death, and is better than everyone else, especially the new wife. Here's one more look at the rest of the house. You can see the exquisite detail in every portion of the sets. The dining room table doesn't just have one bouquet of flowers, there are two, with an even larger arrangement behind on a side table. The fireplaces seem large enough to swallow up the new wife, and there isn't a single thing out of place in the grand entryway with its intricately carved columns. Now, if you've watched some of my previous movies, you can probably guess what movie is going to be featured next. Is it Lawrence of Arabia? Yes, yeah, it is. It's Lawrence of Arabia. We're going to talk about it again because it's my favorite movie. It is impossible, though, for real, to ignore the production design in this film. It is mind-blowingly good. I will try not to talk about it for too long, but no promises. The last two movies featured a lot of interior scenes for the most part, and they're movies on a smaller scale. They would not be considered epic films. But what if you are writing an epic or a vast fantasy type book? Movies like Lawrence of Arabia, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Ben-Hur, Lord of the Rings, those are going to be the type of movies that I would suggest checking out if you need inspiration for how to set your scenes. So let's take a look at one of my favorite shots from Lawrence, and we will take a minute to pick apart the different elements of the production design here. Oh my gosh, this shot is so good. This is a huge crane shot introducing the audience to Wadi Rum, which is a Bedouin encampment. The crew built this set. It took them a week to build this. Look at this. For this 18-second shot. It's amazing. You can see the tents spread out, dotting the landscape, flags flying, people milling about. There are horses and camels and fire pits. This isn't just a couple tents around a campfire. This is like, I don't even know, a half mile at least? I'm terrible at judging distance, but you can definitely see that this is a massive expanse of desert. And they had to fill it with all of these different elements and not make it look cheap. This is not CGI, this is 1962, so all of this is real. Insane, it's so good. But the really cool thing about this movie is that not every scene are these intricately detailed shots that had to be set up over the span of a whole week. But the vast epic of this film isn't always about the labor-intensive design in shots like that. There are also portions of the film that look like this, or even this. Seemingly empty, but let's take a closer look. Here there is a lone figure striding toward the ever-lightening horizon. The desert floor isn't the typical sandy dunes you might think of. Rather, it's dry and cracked and completely flat. The figure's long shadow is cast almost to the very edge of the frame, and the sky is changing from an inky blue to a rosy pink as the sun rises. Finally, let's take a look at a slightly more modern example with one of today's most well-known directors. I feel like you cannot talk about production design and not talk about Wes Anderson. Once you've seen one Wes Anderson film, you can identify his style in any other context. It's very distinct. It's often bright and vibrant with highly stylized elements. So let's examine the production design on the Grand Budapest Hotel. This first image is from the entry to the hotel. This could have been a simple reception desk, but they've gone all out to recreate an almost fantasy-esque version of a posh 1930s hotel. The desk here is circular, and we can see the interior cabinets with all sorts of books and paperwork stacked with relative neatness out of view of the typical guest. The panels around the sides are also decorated with a checkerboard pattern and what looks like a floral or maybe a palm frond type pattern as well. A large black phone sits on the top near an equally large bell. The book that's laid open in front is absolutely massive, not the typical guest book or registration book you might expect to see. Even the lamp on the left side is really fancy with hanging tassels instead of a more conventional lampshade. The rest of the room has flowers and plants, and the entire view is nearly symmetrical. One last view of the hotel is from the basement, clearly out of view of most of the guests, but even here, the movie audience is not disappointed with a lack of design. There are shelves against the far wall holding all sorts of boxes and bins, both wooden and metal, as well as rolled up towels and rags. It's all very neat, a nod to the fastidious and particular hotel owner. There are lanterns hung up on hooks, ladders, a clipboard, and loose papers on the desks. The desk nearest the camera appears to have a leather top to it. Even the handle to the vault that the characters are standing in front of has a fancy, stylized feel to it with the contrasting black and brass colors. Okay, so I hope this gave you a few ideas about the types of detail that you can incorporate into your writing when you're trying to set the scene for a reader. Depending on what genre you're writing, different movies are going to be maybe better for inspiration than others. If you're writing a new adult college romance with college dorm scenes, Lawrence of Arabia probably is not going to be the best movie to turn to for inspiration in this category. So check out the description below. I'm going to try to list a bunch of different films that would go with different categories of books. So if you're writing a fantasy, if you're writing a contemporary, if you're writing a horror, whatever it might be, I'm going to try to list a whole bunch below so that you can go look those up and see if they can provide you some extra inspiration while you're writing. So let me know in the comments, are there any films you can think of that give off just the perfect atmosphere and setting for your project? If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more content from me, do click the subscribe button. I post videos on Tuesdays and Fridays. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye. Dang it. I need my script for this. And is also considered to be one of the first full feature-length film. Ta-da!